I want to take you back, not to kings or cities, but to a place and time that's far older than the idea of history itself. Imagine a landscape of grass and scrub, perhaps an ancient river valley. The sky feels vast. There are animals moving in the distance. Human ancestors moved too, carefully, alertly, but without any of the material culture we take for granted. In that landscape, something small happened that would change everything. It didn't make a spectacular headline in the sky. It didn't create a monument. It was an ordinary action. A stone struck against another stone, and the shard that flew off became, by chance, a razor-sharp edge. That fragment could cut, scrape, and open. It could remove meat from bone, scrape hide, and shape wood. It was raw and simple, but effective. From that mundane, repeated action began a very long story, the story of tools. Archaeologists call the oldest known industry the Oldowan. We find its remains in places like Gona and Hadar in Ethiopia, and Oldowan Gorge in Tanzania. At these sites there are piles of cores, hammerstones, and flakes. The evidence of a technology that dates back over 2 million years. It's not glamorous, but its importance is enormous. For the first time, rocks became more than geology. They became instruments, extensions of a hand, of an intention. So what was happening in the mind and body of the hominin who struck those stones? First, there was perception. The eye-hand coordination to recognize that one rock could flake another in a useful way. Then there was planning, selecting a suitable core, holding it, and deliberately striking it at an angle to produce a sharp flake. Finally, there was learning. This behavior was not merely instinct. It was repeated, taught, and copied. We can understand a lot about early tool users from marks left on bones. Cut marks on animal bones, ancient butchered carcasses, show that these early tool makers used flakes to remove meat and marrow. That meant a new way of gaining calories. Raw meat can be eaten, but splitting bones to access marrow is an innovation that gives high-energy food. That extra energy mattered. It helped bodies and brains, which leads to a crucial connection, tools and brains. Over the broad sweep of human evolution, we see a correlation between improved tool use and increases in brain size. It's not a simple cause and effect, but these developments are linked. Stone tools gave access to nutrients that help fuel the growing human brain. A larger brain, in turn, made more complex behaviors possible, including more sophisticated tool manufacture. For a species like Homo habilis, often associated with Oldowan tools, toolmaking was an adaptive strategy. It changed not only what they ate, but how they organized their lives. The old perception that early hominins were simply scavenging any leftovers is being revised. There is now evidence that toolmakers planned, transported materials, and had repeated habits. Stone sources were chosen, campsites revisited, and techniques standardized, all signs of emerging culture. One of the most revealing things about stone tools is how they show teaching and social learning. When we examine flakes and compare them across sites, we sometimes see consistent patterns, similar angles, similar scars. That suggests not random flaking, but repeated practice and possibly instruction. Think about the skills involved. A teacher demonstrating a strike, a novice copying the angle with awkward hands, then improving. This is the beginning of cultural transmission. Knowledge passing from one mind to another, from one generation to the next. We also cannot overlook the role of hands. Tools didn't just influence cognition. They shaped anatomy. The human hand, its thumb, its grip, became increasingly dexterous. Precision grips, the ability to hold tiny flakes and manipulate them, are biological complements to tool use. Hands and tools co-evolved. As hands improved their manipulation, tool forms became subtler. As tools became subtler, manual skills sharpened. Finally, in this chapter, I want to emphasize how modest and iterative this change was. The Oldowan was not a single invention with a single inventor. It was a set of repeated practices across populations and millennia. It's a slow social revolution, and yet that repetition laid the foundations for everything to come. When you pick up a simple pocket knife or the edge of a pair of scissors, you are holding a distant echo of those first flicks. A simple edge, a little ingenuity, and the human adventure began. If Oldowan flakes are the opening stanza, the next long movement in our story is the Acheulean, the era of the hand axe. This wasn't a sudden miracle, it was an extended refinement of knapping technique that appeared roughly 1.7 million years ago and persisted for more than 1 million years. Acheulean hand axes are recognizable, teardrop or ovat shapes, bifacially worked, often symmetrical. They are strikingly beautiful in their regularity. Where Oldowan flakes are about sharp edges and expedience, Acheulean hand axes show planning. To make a finished hand axe, a maker had to conceive of a final shape, select an appropriate raw material, and execute a sequence of strikes to remove large flakes and thin the core symmetrically. This implies a mental template, a foresight of a form that does not yet exist. That cognitive ability is significant. Archaeological finds show that hand axes are found across Africa, into Europe, and parts of Asia. Evidence of hominin populations carrying technology across landscapes. The widespread distribution also suggests a strong selective advantage. Hand axes were versatile. Butchery, chopping wood, digging, perhaps even as social signals, indicators of skill. Some researchers have proposed that exceptional hand axes functioned as displays of competence, a kind of prehistoric showmanship, while others emphasize their utility. The truth is likely both, utility interwoven with social meaning. When we examine wear patterns on hand axes, we see the telltale signs of repeated use. Polish from meat cutting, microchipping from working hard materials. Some hand axes were curated. Instead of being discarded after use, they were reshaped and maintained, a sign that people attached value to them and perhaps handed them down. The Acheulean period also shows evidence of transport. Raw materials moved from one place to another. That suggests planning in mobility, choices about where to live, and knowledge of landscape resources. Imagine hominins carrying a heavy flake or core for kilometers because the material was superior. That is logistical thinking. Around this time, other skills also matured. Butchery techniques became more coordinated, perhaps suggesting group hunts or organized scavenging. The ability to extract marrow, to knap core tools systematically, to prepare hide. These behaviors imply cooperative activity. There is a growing complexity in social life allied to technical skill. It's useful to compare us with our closest living relatives. Chimpanzees use tools, twigs to fish termites, stones to crack nuts. Such behaviors are meaningful. But human stone technology differs in degree and kind. Our ancestors adopted a more intentional method. They shaped stone to precise requirements, transported raw materials long distances, and developed repertoires shared across groups. We also see new forms of cognition, working memory, sequential planning, and abstraction. The hand axe maker holds in mind the final form, imagines a series of strikes, and executes them. That is a kind of mental architecture necessary for other complex tasks, for language, for constructing shelters, for later symbolic behavior. Fast forward through time, and we encounter innovations in technique. Prepared cores, Levallois techniques, blade production. Each step shows a refinement in cognitive control, motor precision, and cultural transmission. People didn't invent tools in isolation. They built sequences of practice, apprenticeships of the hand and mind. There's another important factor. Tool use changed diets. As tools improved, hominins gained access to a wider range of resources. Meat processing, marrow extraction, and plant processing became more efficient. That dietary breadth supported higher population densities and allowed groups to colonize new environments. Tools were literal key holders to ecological niches. For early humans, tools also shaped identity. The presence of a familiar technology allowed groups to recognize each other, to form traditions. Archaeologists can sometimes trace cultural boundaries by tool types. Tools became a material expression of group knowledge, a shared legacy. Finally, this chapter's lesson is that tools were not merely answers to immediate problems. They were catalysts for cognitive, social, and ecological change. A hand axe is at once a technological object and an index of evolving minds. In the final chapter, let us think about the longer consequences. Toolmaking did something unexpected. It made teaching necessary, it made memory communal, and it pushed the human mind toward abstraction. By the time of later Paleolithic industries, toolkits became complex. There were specialized implements for hunting, for hide working, for woodworking, and for processing plants. Mastery of these required learning across time. This created niches for teachers and learners, roles in society that changed social organization. The apprentice learned the rhythm of knapping through repetition. The elder imbued knowledge with judgment. Which stone to select, how to angle the strike, when to stop flaking. Human culture is cumulative. The skills one generation perfects are base material for the next to refine. Simple inventions accumulate. That cumulative culture is one of the defining features of our species. In this sense, stone tools are not just tools. They are early chapters in a long book of technical knowledge. Each method, each trick, is a line of code in human culture. We also should consider symbolism. As time progresses, we find decorated tools, personal ornaments, and art, increasingly abstract behavior that shares the geometric template of tool planning. Some researchers suggest the cognitive routines involved in knapping, envisioning a form, executing precise movements, are related to capacities for symbolism and language. It's not that toolmaking caused language, but toolmaking and language evolve in a feedback loop of complexity. Another crucial development is specialization. In later prehistory, certain individuals may have been full-time toolmakers, while others engaged in hunting or gathering. Specialization frees minds to innovate. When not everyone is occupied in immediate subsistence, some can devote attention to improving techniques, experimenting with new forms, and passing those forms on. Specialization is the runway for technology acceleration. Let's pause and compare this with other species. Some animals show tool innovations. Crows bending wires, sea otters using rocks to open shellfish. Those behaviors are remarkable, but human tool culture demonstrates fidelity and accumulation across generations to a degree unseen elsewhere. Our stone tools are archaeological footprints of that uniqueness. The ripple effects are enormous. Tools allowed longer childhoods in our species. Juveniles could spend more time learning complex tasks rather than solely foraging for calories. Longer childhoods enable more learning, more socialization, and ultimately more complex cultures. Tools, diet, brain, lifespan, social structures. They braided together into the tapestry of what we call human life. Finally, think about the symbolic power of tools in modern terms. The first stone flakes were literal bite-sized improvements to life. Today, we code software, design chips, and build architectures that exceed the scale of a single human mind. But the mindset, like seeing a problem and making an external aid to solve it, remains the same. Tools are not only objects, they embody the human impulse to extend ourselves. As I close the story, I want to return to a simple image. A person, 2 stones, a flake cutting through hide. That small scene echoes through time to a surgeon's scalpel, to a carpenter's chisel, to the code that runs the phone in your pocket. The continuity is striking. From flake to network, from the edge that cuts to the ideas that connect, the line is unbroken. If you enjoyed this look at the first tools and their legacy, please subscribe to Genesis of Genius. Share this episode with someone who loves history and science. Leave a comment. What simple invention do you think changed the world the most? And if you want, tell me which topic I should explore next. Language, agriculture, or metallurgy? Your suggestions shape this series. Thank you for listening. Keep your curiosity sharp like that first flake, and I'll see you in the next story.